Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Thursday Tea Time Live. First time that I am streaming on, where should I put this? That I'm streaming on IGTV and YouTube, as opposed to Facebook and YouTube. So let's give this a go then. I hope everyone is well. Thank you for joining me. This is if you're joining me on IGTV, this is the first time that I'm trying this on IGTV. This is my weekly Thursday Tea Time Live. I apologise for already being out of breath. I've just run up the stairs because I forgot to get myself a water. And if you've joined me before, you'll know that I basically talk for as long as I can manage, and you can stomach me. So water is always necessary and required. So I hope everyone can hear me okay. I think I'm mic'd up well enough. Last week I did forget to turn the mic on, so apologies for that. And apologies to those of you on the podcast who, by the time I put it on the podcast, I just had to cut off the obviously blank beginning, which made it sound rather an abrupt start. Now, let me get into this week. So if any of you are new to Thursday Tea Time Live, I just chat basically history, and I am very up for you asking me questions in the comments. Just say hi if you want as well. Let me know where you are watching from. Let me know what the weather is like where you are as well, because summer has finally come to the UK in 2021. We weren't sure it would happen. It took a while, but it is now here. Well, it's a bit dull today, but it's warm. It's warm, which is nice, and dry, because although we have a reputation for having a lot of rain, we don't actually generally get a lot of rain, but we have this year. Welcome from Argentina. And Charlotte from NC. Sorry, I don't know all the North Carolina. Oh, from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'll get there. Right, cool, brilliant. Well, thank you for joining me. I love this, from all over the world. So this is lovely. Now, before I forget, I got it right. Before I forget, whether you are watching me, hi from Indiana, Greenwood, Indiana. Oh, so what time are we on? 1 o'clock. So you're waking up to me, is that right? Hopefully I can kick your day off nicely of a Thursday. Thursday can be a bit of an odd day, isn't it? We're not quite at Friday yet. So it could be a bit of a, oh, come on, it's nearly the weekend. And hopefully now, wherever you are, you have weekends to look forward to as well, something slightly different. I was at the pub last night. Hi, Sue in Essex. And I'd actually managed to do a clubhouse room from the pub just about 9 a.m. in Argentina. Well, good morning. And so that's what I was going to mention. Clubhouse, first of all, if you're on IGTV, then in my bio, there's a link, and in there's basically it links to all sorts of things that I do, and the top one on there is join Clubhouse, because I now have 1,000 invites for Clubhouse. So if you're not on Clubhouse and you want to be, it's open now to Android users and as well as iPhone users, which it's always been open to. But it's still invite only, but I have 1,000, so jump on in there and grab one, and you can join me on Clubhouse. So when I'm talking about Clubhouse, you'll know what on earth I'm on about, but I let you know what we've been talking about on Clubhouse anyway. And anyway, yesterday I actually managed to do a room from the pub, which with signal and noise was quite a feat, I thought. And we were talking last night about the Curious Art Historian. Hi, welcome. I was reading your name, then it gets squidged up on the screen. So last night on Clubhouse, we were talking things that didn't go to plan. Our Wednesday night room is called History After Dark, and it's one where we take the reins off. We let ourselves talk about maybe things that are a little bit more controversial or funny or rude or I don't know, a little bit less polite, or maybe things you would discuss in polite society. But last night we were talking things that didn't go to plan. And I had two examples, and only one. I only managed to get in one. All our rooms are around about half an hour to 3/4 of an hour. We don't go on for much more than that. And last night, yes, so we were talking things that didn't quite go to plan. And I was talking about the coronation of William the Conqueror. So I don't know if you know this, but William the Conqueror was crowned at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066. 1066, we had three kings in 1066 because Edward the Confessor died, and then Harold Godwinson became king, also, by the way, crowned at Westminster Abbey. And then obviously he lost to William at Battle of Hastings, and then William was crowned at Westminster Abbey. Now, during the coronation service, welcome Michael from London, they the whole idea that, well, the message that William was trying to get across with his coronation service was, I'm bringing peace now. Now, interestingly, he'd kept the pretense, or the legal pretense, of the country still being at war during the time between the end of the Battle of Hastings and his coronation. Basically meant he could do what he liked. And one of the things he liked to do was, let's call it a preemptive strike. And he would burn villages, put people to death, basically as a kind of warning, we're here, we're in charge, no uprisings, please. And I've burnt down your house just to make sure that you're okay with that. So during his coronation, during the crowning ceremony, it was supposed to be, bringing peace. But when the congregation, sort of, what do you call it? When they, I don't know, whatever, all hail the king, whatever they shouted, that was mistaken by his already sort of, well, his troops outside had been sort of used to this behavior, if you like, for a while. They thought it was an uprising and started setting fire to the buildings around the abbey and caused chaos, and most of the congregation fled, and William was left shaking and with only a few of the clergy left to complete the ceremony. So that did not go to plan, and that was my example of something in history that didn't go to plan in our room last night on Clubhouse. So like I say, if you want to join me on Clubhouse, I'm there regularly with Sarah Morris, who's the Tudor travel guide, Catherine Brooks, who is the Tudor tracker, and Kat Marchant, who has the Reading the Past channel on YouTube. And we have a lot of fun. We talk a lot of history, but we do have a lot of fun on the way. And I think now that things are opening up, we're going to be doing more, we'll be on location a lot more. Now, you won't be able to see us because Clubhouse is all audio. It's a bit like listening to a radio station or a podcast. And those of you who are joining me on the podcast today will already be used to listening to me and my sometimes good, sometimes failed attempts at describing something visual with words. But I will keep practicing and get better. Anyway, so a lot of the rooms, I think increasingly will be on location for our rooms, and they're at a regular time, and then occasionally we do bonus ones. So Mondays and Fridays at 5 o'clock, this is all London time, we have history half hour. Wednesdays at 8:15 p.m. we have History After Dark, like I say. And on a Sunday, so you might be interested in joining me this Sunday, every Sunday at 4 p.m. London time, we do Travelling Tudor Britain in it's called the Tudor History Club. And we pick a Tudor location each week. And it's usually myself, Sarah Morris, and Deborah Royal. Deborah does the Tudor Times website, which looks at all things sort of Tudor and into the early Stuart era. And this week we're talking Ludlow Castle. And some of you who've joined me on my Thursday tea time live for a few weeks now, in fact, we've been doing it a few months, will know that I've spoken about Ludlow Castle quite often in the past, because it's a fabulous place and absolutely steeped in history. I mean, the Tudors is just a small part of its history, but it's got a massive history. And those of you who are in my Patreon at patreon.com/British history, you have access now on the upper tiers to a full interview with Matt Lewis at Ludlow Castle, all about that history. It's really, really fascinating. Ludlow Castle and the town itself is a lovely place. Just if you just like nice places to go, but its history is absolutely fascinating. Michael, William made a rod for his own back. He did indeed, and I wish they would make a film about Harold in the vein of Braveheart, but more factual. Yeah, well, historical dramas are not necessarily known for their factual basis, are they? More and more, in fact, seeming to go along the drama side. I don't really have much of an issue with that, as long as it gets people interested. I think that's the key thing for historical dramas. Personally, I love something I don't know anything about, so I loved Versailles. Anyone who knows about the history of the French court probably hates Versailles, but I really enjoyed that because I didn't care how factually correct it was. But I watched it in that vein, in that I'm not taking anything particularly here as fact. If I'm interested, I'll go and look it up. But the point I think you're making there, Michael, as well, though, is if there was a historical drama based around that time, then inevitably interest is pricked in that period, and you will get more people learning about it. So yes, that would be really good, wouldn't it? So around about that period, though, slightly later, 1215, so we're in the month of June now, and last week I spoke about Magna Carta. Anyone who is in my patrons, all of my patrons this week, get got Tudors on the brain now, a travel guide to Magna Carta. So it basically tells the story of Magna Carta in 1215, with places to go, so you could sort of follow the trail of the Magna Carta, and that will be available. I've just finished writing it. In fact, I just printed it off. Bear with me a second, because I was going to show you. No, I've left it. See, left it on the printer. Oh, it's only done the first page anyway. But anyway, any of you are in my Patreon, you'll be getting something that's more than one page about the trail of Magna Carta, because I do a monthly blog for patrons. But this month, it's the travel guide. And I spoke about Magna Carta last week, and one of the things that I love mentioning, that maybe it's well known now, but the Magna part. So Magna Carta it basically translates to the Great Charter, and because of its fame, and because we know how significant it's been in as a basis for democracies and for sort of human rights activism and things like that, the Great, I think, is often interpreted as in it's a great, as an important charter. Literally, it's a great charter, but it was the original literal term of great, which is the larger charter, and it's because there were two produced at the same time: the Charter of Runnymede and the Charter of the Forests. And the Charter of the Forest was the lesser charter. So Magna Carta was the larger, the greater charter, the Great Charter. And that's why it's called Magna Carta, or the Great Charter. But it just, as with a lot of things, it became known as that in order to differentiate it from something else. For instance, Westminster. Westminster is to differentiate it from St. Paul's in the East, which was the Eastminster. So there you go. Whitehall Palace was the name Whitehall was given to it to distinguish it from the Palace of Westminster, because I mentioned a book last week called Houses of Power, which is by Simon Thurley, about Tudor houses. Now, in that, I've just got to the bit about Whitehall. And the Palace of Westminster, which is where our House of Parliament sits now and is actually referred to as Palace of Westminster still. That had a big fire. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. And then Henry decided he wanted to take York Place from Cardinal Wolsey, and him and Anne Boleyn were going to create a home for themselves, because all of the other palaces at that time, Catherine of Aragon was still queen. Catherine of Aragon still had her own apartments. Anne didn't have anything. Anyway, so they decided they were going to build here. Now, honestly, it's a fascinating book. Henry VIII was referring to Whitehall as the new Palace of Westminster. So it made me, I'd have to look into it more, but it makes it sound like what he was actually doing was thinking he was just moving the Palace of Westminster up road, because it's really not very far. But you still have the Palace of Westminster there, although albeit in its kind of dilapidated state, or whatever state it was in by then. So it became, so then you have to have a name to distinguish it, and it became known as Whitehall, and then Whitehall stuck. So there you go. Went off on a bit of a tangent, but how things are named is interesting, isn't it? Because it might have an official name, but the name that comes to us that we remember is the one that that made sense to people. Look at some of the place names. I used to work for a water company in the flooding team. There you go, there's a bit of odd background. And we used to sort of think, oh goodness, did people not work out when they bought a house on Watery Lane that maybe there was some historic issue there with flooding? But no. But they are literal. Things like that are quite literal. Anyway, so that's coming up from for patrons. My normal videos, my little snippets out on YouTube, I haven't been able to get them out this week. Good afternoon, Miranda. Thank you for joining. But don't worry, I will catch up. It's because I have been able to get out and about. Yay! And I went to meet Sarah Morris at Kenilworth Castle. Now, we didn't actually go into the castle because I wanted to go and see the site of the I don't know how you pronounce it, the Palace of Plaisance. Probably really not anything like how it's supposed to be pronounced, but where you have Kenilworth Castle, around it was a massive lake, and massive. On the other side of this lake, Henry V built this House of Plaisance, similar to how Greenwich Palace began, as a non-fortified or less fortified, it did actually have a moat, house that was not for any political purpose. So all of the palaces and castles had a political purpose. They had a public, there were public spaces where people, ambassadors and convoys, and I don't know, not convoys. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, would be in the place of work. Okay, so some of these, so anyway, Henry V, sorry, set up this, or had this Palace of Plaisance built. You may actually see on later plans of Kenilworth Castle this palace suddenly appear inside the curtain wall of Kenilworth Castle. The Kenilworth Castle you'd think of it as, and that's because Henry VIII moved some of the timbers from that original house to a new Palace of Plaisance. if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm pronouncing it wrong over and over again. So it was moved to inside the curtain wall, and none of it exists anymore. So anyway, I wanted Sarah to take me, because she's been there before, to the site of this palace. Now I don't actually know how long it took us to walk. Okay, it was a leisurely pace, but it probably took us about 20 minutes to walk to the site where this palace had been. It's more like a medieval house. Anyway, there's the plateau where it was sited is still there, with the groundwork for the moat as well, still there. But that 20 minutes walk from where we parked next to the castle over to where it is just gives you some idea perhaps, of the size of this lake that had been. I don't think it went all the way around because there was a town on one side, but it was at least on half to 3/4 of the surrounding the castle. So it was it's a long way away. Michael, how much of Leeds Castle is medieval and how much is Tudor? I don't think much is either, actually, now. Obviously it is very old, the site, and there will be parts of the castle that are very old. I've only been to Leeds Castle once, not too long ago, and there isn't a lot of Tudor and pre-Tudor Tudor castle left, but it's still very, very much worth going to see. It's still a beautiful castle, but it's more. I'm trying to think, I took lots of pictures for my membership at the time, and I seem to, because I was fascinated by the the early 20th century in places like Leeds Castle. Hi, Ali. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, because the early 20th century, a lot of these castles were still occupied. And then, of course, with the advent of the First World War and following the Second World War, there were each has their own story, and each has their own story as to how come they've ended up either empty or as a hotel or as an attraction. But so that answers your question. I'll be I knew this would come up. Ali's asking me if I saw the Anne Boleyn show on Channel 5. I haven't yet. If anyone else has seen it, just stick a rating out of 10 in the chat. Just put a number 1 to 10. What do you think? I've heard that some of the portrayals of some of the characters are, I think Henry VIII is I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know, but I'm hearing that the portrayal of Henry VIII isn't particularly accurate. I think Jane Rochford is becoming is portrayed again as kind of this evil, calculated figure, and that she sort of always gets tarred with this brush, and it's not necessarily accurate, so no, I haven't, and I'm not sure. I'll tell you why. I'm not overly drawn to historical drama for a start, unless it's something like I said a little bit earlier on, Ali, before you joined, unless it's something that I'm not very knowledgeable on. So sorry, Miranda's asking if she can have a link to watch it from Belgium. If you go onto the Anne Boleyn Society on Instagram, not right now because you're watching me, but in a bit, James Peacock there has shared in the comments a link for people outside of the UK to be able to watch it, I believe, but I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. So if you have a look on the Anne Boleyn Society, he's got a post about it, and in the comments he's put where you can find it. Yeah, so unless it's something like Versailles, I loved Versailles, as I said, because I didn't know much about it. So it was a lovely sunny day, on a sunny evening or warm evening, Tuesday evening. So I didn't watch it because I sat out in the garden instead. It felt a bit like it'd be homework. It felt like something, that a teacher would set. In that I wasn't going to watch it anyway. So maybe I'll get around to it. We'll see. Right. Let's move on. So I will be, I was going to say, finish off the bit about the Palace of Plaisance. If you look on, it might have been on my story, I will share the photographs that I took from there on Instagram. I mean, there's not a fat lot to see, but it's one of those. Well, you definitely have to use your imagination, but actually standing there on this plateau, knowing that it was once used by the medieval kings as a place to relax and have fun, was very moving. It's just, I mean, the cows are using it very well now. They love it. Oh, Michael used to work at the Warris Collection. So maybe, did you know, you probably don't like Versailles then, do you? What do you think of Versailles? Let me know. So I'm back with Sarah tomorrow because we are recording her weekly, I keep saying weekly when I don't mean weekly, her monthly podcast, which is about travelling Tudor Britain. And tomorrow we are giving, Michael likes it. Good. Okay, cool. We're talking about travelling, the best ways to travel using public transport. And I'm going to give you some ideas of timescales. If you're trying to get across London, if you're trying to get, well, I need to think. I mean, what would be useful if you were planning a trip to the UK? What kind of things would be useful to know? Because one thing I always try and point out to people is we're a small country, but we're congested. It can take blinking ages to get to places because we have traffic jams a lot. So it's always worth factoring in, or actually looking at travel times. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about that tomorrow in Top Tips. Miranda thought Versailles was over the top decadent. Yes. Well, it was, wasn't it? Ali, should we rent a car to see the sights? Well, I will cover that in the podcast then. I actually would say, after I've just said about traffic jams, but I would say yes, to be honest. It depends where you want to go and what you want to see. If you just want to head to London and do London, then no, there's no need. And actually it would be a pain. It would be expensive. You wouldn't have anywhere to park it. And it wouldn't really get you anywhere any quicker. However, if you wanted to do somewhere like Ludlow, like I mentioned earlier, because Deb and myself will be talking about Ludlow Castle in Clubhouse at 4:00 on Sunday, then I would suggest yes. And then have a look, plot your route, and do a few of these more, further out places, because you'll get to see places that are a little bit quieter as well, and places that they're not serviced by public transport very easily. So yes, if you can manage to drive on the correct side of the road, correct side for us, and that doesn't freak you out, then yeah. And you want to go to some of the more far out places, then yeah. I mean, you've got places, we've got Roman ruins, in places like Wroxeter or up on Hadrian's Wall at the top of England, and yeah, unless you're going on an organised group tour, then yeah, I think a car would be a great idea. Miranda, can I join Clubhouse too? You absolutely can. So if you go to my bio, then you can click the link in my bio and you'll see the top option is join Clubhouse, and I have 1,000 invites, so yes, you can go and join. Anyone, even Android phones now apparently are working as far as I'm aware. Catherine's joined. Tudor Tracker, come to Leicestershire and I'll show you a good time. Not sure what you mean by that, but there's a good, so Bosworth Battlefield. If you want to go and see Bosworth Battlefield, again, unless you're on an organised group tour, I don't know, like with somebody like British History Tours, then you need a car to get around, I would suggest. And if you're going to Bosworth, you would want to go to Leicester and go and see Richard III's where they found him, and you can also literally a few steps opposite go and see where he's finally interred. Catherine, battlefields and a dead king. What more could you want? Exactly. So where have I got to now? So traveling the UK. So I will be recording that with Sarah tomorrow. So I think it goes out in a couple of weeks' time. But if you look on either mine or Sarah's Instagram, then you will be able to see when that comes out. We'll share it. And she's at the Tudor Travel Guide. Michael, I wish we knew more about Flodden and the Scottish Border Wars. Bosworth would be great as well. I presume that's a separate. That's two separate sentences. Sorry, I read it out as if it was one. Yeah, well, I'm sure there are people who know a lot about them. The thing with the Scottish border is you had stuff going on pretty much all the time as well. Obviously, we had the big battles, but in terms of sort of incursions and skirmishes, at certain periods, it's almost constant, which is why if you go up to the north of England as well, you'll find more fortified houses generally than remain in the south, and that's because of that, because these sort of incursions and then retaliations and whatever. The other thing you might want to do if you're heading over to my bio link, and also I've put this in the chat on YouTube, you have the link to Clubhouse, and you also have a link to my newsletter, which I'd love you to sign up to, because basically it just means that I email you every Sunday, mostly, and I oh yes, Catherine, I'll tell them about that in a second, and with links basically to everything I've done in the week and things that are coming up. So when I do get around to sharing my videos on YouTube that I've done and got to edit and put out, then it's all in the same newsletter. You've got all the links there, and then plus any news, obviously. Yes, Catherine, who's the Tudor Tracker on Instagram and on YouTube. If anyone is in the UK and can get to Bosworth on June the 19th, she is doing a battlefield walk with Mike Ingram, which is well worth doing. And I was going to do it, and I'm a little bit gutted, but I basically I've got my daughter into an archery club, so she's doing an archery course and she has to go on particular days. So I was going to have a go, but they're full. I think I'm gonna have a go at that. I think that sounds fun. Archery, very, very historic hobby. What else have we got? Michael, Henry VIII destroyed the Reivers. I don't know what that means. He destroyed a lot of stuff. He built a lot of stuff and he destroyed a lot of stuff. Jonathan Foyle years ago did a program called Henry VIII, Patron or Plunderer, which was fascinating because he was both, in terms of art and building. And he's like, Michael, is she using £150 longbow? Yeah, obviously. No, maybe we'll build up to that. So this is a course you can do, and the certificate you get then lets you go and I think then you can rock up to any archery club and you've got like a basic certificate which lets you practice or whatever, or do the next stage. It's exciting. I really want to have a go. I'll watch her for a bit and see what I want to do. Now, before I move on from Clubhouse, if you do get onto Clubhouse, so like I say, follow that link. That will take you into the History and Culture Club, which is one of our clubs on there. We have a sister club called the Tudor History Club. Indeed, Miranda, Henry did plunder all the monasteries. And Catherine's put me off now, suggesting we do drunk archery. I might need a little bit more practice when I'm sober before I try it drunk. Or I don't know, maybe I'll be better drunk. I have really bad eyesight, so so anything might help actually. Michael, you fire a longbow using your back muscles. Well, I can do the pull-up, so maybe there's something I can manage there. I would like to give it a go. Sorry, before I move on from Clubhouse, and then so that link will take you into the club. We have a sister club called the Tudor History Club as well. Please look that up and join that. And you can follow me as a person in my own right. I am at Philippa B. At Philippa B on Clubhouse. So I'd love you to come and join me as well. And then that sends you notifications when I'm speaking. I'm not always necessarily speaking in my own rooms because I join other people's rooms and sometimes put my 2 penneth in. But, you join a room, and if they're talking about something you want to listen to, you stay. And if you don't, you press the leave quietly button and you go. It's fine. Michael, drunk archery, you'd end up like King Harold, one in the eye. King Harold or William Rufus. He died by a stray arrow as well, didn't he? William II. In a hunting accident. Yeah. So anyway, let's move on. What else did we doing in? So we've also discussed this week coronations because it was the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's coronation. A much happier event in Anne's life than is normally talked about. And we just used that as the prompt really to start talking about coronations, which is why I then remembered the story about William the Conqueror's coronation, which if any of you just joined, I was talking about earlier as one of those examples in history where something didn't go to plan. And then we're talking about the pageantry around coronations. We talked, Gail Thomas joined us from British Sovereigns and Royals, and she talked about the Stone of Scone. Now, anyone who follows me, I've talked about the Stone of Scone, and in fact I did a video about it only a few weeks ago. This is the sacred stone in Scotland. It was at Scone Abbey, where legend has that, I don't know from when, but all of the Scottish kings had been crowned. Well, Edward I, also known as Longshanks, also known as Hammer of the Scots, goes up to Scotland, takes advantage of the difficulties up there with the succession. This is all in my video, which you can watch on YouTube, and puts himself in the basically what he's trying to do is persuade Scotland that they need to be under his control. Like Wales has become a Principality of England, he wants Scotland to become a Principality of England, but the Scots are not really having any of this. But one thing Edward does is steal this Stone of Scone. And there's 2 stories, well, a story and my conjecture. First one that I'd love to be true, but I'm not sure there's any evidence for it, is that the monks, hi, Divina, does that spell, in Mexico City, welcome, hi, good morning. And yes, so Edward takes this Stone of Scone, and one of the stories goes that the monks at Scone had basically flipped out this stone for a replacement, so not the true Stone of Scone, and then so Edward basically steals the wrong one. But Edward comes back down to England and has a coronation chair created, so built with a shelf basically underneath it. There's a picture of it in the video, to put the Stone of Scone in. Now, some have interpreted that as so I've just had a message from my children. Some people interpret that as him hiding the stone. But when I was looking into this story, what occurred to me is, as I've just mentioned, Edward wanted Scotland to be subservient to England. What better way than sticking the coronation stone of Scotland underneath the coronation chair of England? So that's my conjecture, but I feel like that was a show. All right, you're not going to officially subjugate to me, so I'm going to do this. I'm basically going to sit on all the English kings from now on are going to get crowned on top of the Scottish stone. In other words, I consider, as Edward I, I consider Scotland subservient to England. That's just my theory. But anyway, so I go into that in the Stone of Scone video. I think I've called it Stealing the Stone of Scone. So have a look. It's not hugely long. You know me. I try and introduce you to bits of history, especially bits that potentially seem familiar, but maybe I've found out something that puts a little different slant on it. So they're not massively long. I might start doing longer form videos next year and do fewer of them. But for this year, I'm sticking with the sort of snippets. I need a better name for them, but that's what they go down in my diary as. And the other thing we've been talking about is history heists, prompted by the theft of Mary Queen of Scots rosary beads from Arundel Castle. Beads along with lots of gold cups and all sorts of things. And the real tragedy, of course, is that they might have a price, or someone might pay something for them for the gold, or because they want an artifact. Goodness knows what they're going to do with them, as we talked about last week. It's not like you can put it on display or tell your mates you've got it. But the fact that Mary Queen of Scots had these beads, she took them with her. They were with her at her execution, and so she touched them. They were personal. That link. And we've lost it. That makes them priceless. It makes them absolutely priceless. And we talked about other history heists. Don't know if any of you remember going back to Magna Carta 2019, I think it was. Someone tried to steal the Salisbury Cathedral Magna Carta. So this is one of the 1215 copies. Although if you read sort of more academic books about Magna Carta, they don't call them copies. There's a particular term, because a copy would be almost like a facsimile, an exact copy, and they're not. And the reason they're not is for a few reasons. One, they're on parchment, which is treated sheepskin. So not every sheep is the same size and shape. Sheep aren't as uniform as you may think, and so each bit of parchment is slightly different, so the way they fit it on is slightly different. And then each would have, in order to get these out quickly, each would have to go out to an abbey. In order to get these out quickly, obviously you've got multiple scribes scribing or copying the original. Then of course, mistakes are made. So each one has its own individual mistakes on it. Welcome, Monica Ciao, joining us from Italy. So each of these Magna Cartas are unique, and there's only 4 of the 1215 version remaining, one at Salisbury Cathedral. And 2019, someone tries to steal it. Now, the story goes with that one. That this man was working alone. He wasn't sophisticated in any way, shape, or form. It was more a I don't know. I think it was a desperate attempt. He said that he thought that it was that it wasn't the real document, but that's not really a reason to take a hammer to the glass. But he didn't get it anyway. But anyway, didn't stop him attempting it. And then controversially, I had to leave this conversation because I had another appointment, but we started talking. I don't know if Catherine's still with us, but we started talking about basically whether the British Museum is just full of stolen artifacts. But I had to leave, so I don't know what the conclusion of that conversation was. Catherine, he was claiming mental health problems and thought the copy wasn't real. That's it. Yeah. So he thought this copy of the Magna Carta wasn't real. But if he'd have managed to get hold of that, like I said, there's only 4 versions left. And in fact, the Salisbury one, as far as I think is the best copy. It's got no seal on it. The seal was lost. But but because they all had a seal hanging off the bottom, but this one hasn't got it anymore, but it's the most complete one as you look at it. There's 2 in the British Library on permanent display, and the other one is at Lincoln Cathedral on permanent display, and they're the 1215 version. Then you will find the 1217 versions as well, and that's part of the reason that Magna Carta survives. I've gone into this I've gone into this with for my patrons today, so look out for that if you're in my patron. But yeah, the part of the as I interpret it anyway, part of the reason, big reason for the Magna Carta to have survived is because King John died the following year. He died in October 1216, and he died of dysentery up near Newark. I shouldn't laugh, but he was an awful man. There is no words to describe how evil this man was. Anyway, so he dies of dysentery. He ate too many peaches and drank too much cider on a bad tummy already, and it didn't go well. So he dies, and his 9-year-old son, Henry, becomes king, Henry III, crowned at Gloucester Cathedral with his mum's, what do they call it? Like a small bangle, basically, like a bracelet. Crowned at Gloucester Cathedral. Anyway, it would have been Abbey then. And he's a minor. So you've got Earl Marshall and another man who I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. And they're his, regents, if you like. And Marshall has this fabulous idea that instead of keeping Magna Carta, which by this point anyway had been annulled, erased, kiboshed by Pope Innocent III on John's request, what they should do is reissue Magna Carta, but instead of it being in response to the demands of the barons, they'll reissue it as a royal document. So that is why you then get a Magna Carta 1217. That is under Henry III, but at that point he's only 9 or 10 years old, and so it's his ministers being rather clever and reissuing this document. And then it gets reissued again in 1225, I think, and then again in later on in the 13th century. Anyway, so that's why you get the different. That's why you get the different versions. Hello. Everyone's got such funny handle names on Instagram that I don't know what to call you. But hello, Texas. Catherine, consensus was that we should give our stuff back. Give stuff back. We wouldn't like it, we wouldn't like it if someone removed something from, say, Westminster Abbey, took it abroad. You get the idea. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's not. Do you know what I was thinking as well about this? Is now we have digital, and you may disagree. I don't mind. Feel free to disagree with me. But now that we have, ways of digitally recording items. I mean, if you go on the Mary Rose website, you can see 3D images of the artifacts. Everything. You can see everything. So if that artifact happened to get lost or destroyed, we have, as close to real life recording of it as we can. So could we not do that and return the original things? Am I being too simplistic? I mean, if they're not ours in the first place, then then we can only do so much, surely. Michael, when Richard Wallace collected all the artifacts, they were being thrown out into the street in the Revolution. They would have been destroyed if he'd not saved them. Yeah. Well, so each individual item or perhaps event which brought certain things to the museums would, it's not all going to be the same, is it? It's put across as the same. Oh, Britain just went and plundered the world and brought it back. I'm sure that's the case in some, but Michael's just pointed out there with the Wallace collection, that's not the same for everything. Apparently Dr. Cat had suggested digitalisation and returning as well. Oh, I feel clever now because Dr. Cat is ever so clever. And I've just said the same thing she did. Doug says only 1% of the British Museum's 8 million artefacts are on show. So there's a good argument for returning things as well, surely. Because these things, what point is there of it's like having your loft full. Anyone else got their loft or cellar full? You're like, couldn't find it if I wanted it. Don't even know it's there. What's the point of keeping it? That's how I go about doing my loft clearance when I do it. If I didn't know it was there, it needs to just go. Cool. Well, yes, controversial topics, but I like them. I think they're important though, aren't they? It's an important thing to think about anyway. Now, I mentioned that on Sunday at 4:00 London time, I'm in a room on Clubhouse with Deborah talking about Ludlow Castle. We have our history half an hour, which is our regular room on tomorrow at 5:00. I don't think we have a room title, which we will work one out. No bother about that. But if you do if you're new to Clubhouse or you're old to Clubhouse or you're going to join Clubhouse and there's something you would like to hear myself, Sarah Morris, Dr. Cat and Catherine talk about and or join in, because on Clubhouse you can come and join and speak to us live, then please do DM me on Instagram and let me know. Because we're happy to we're happy to take suggestions. Catherine says it's a surprise room tomorrow. Excellent. I like those. It's a bit like this. This is a surprise. Thursday Tea Time Live is always a surprise. But I've been managing to speak for 52 minutes, so thank you for sticking with me, everybody. Now, last week, oh yes, I've got some things to mention too. So last week I mentioned, and I've already mentioned it a little bit earlier on, the Simon Thurley book, Houses of Power, which I'd recommend if you're interested in Tudor buildings. Honestly, you pick up facts. I will have definitely forgotten 10 times more than I've remembered out of this book. It's absolutely packed. Just thought of another interesting fact from that book, which was about the Henry VII Chapel. Now, I mentioned last week I was in London the previous week and I did a lot of filming in Westminster and Whitehall, ready to do the history of Westminster and Whitehall for my patrons at the end of July. And one of the things that I will be talking about is the Henry VII Chapel. Now, Henry VII obviously built, it's a lady chapel, but now known as the Henry VII Chapel. And he had that built on Westminster, but that wasn't originally where he was going to have the family mausoleum. It was going to be at Windsor. So, but he had it moved. He decided, I can't remember the story now. See, I told you, I forget as much out of this book as I remember. It's such a brilliant book. So that's Houses of Power by Simon Thurley. The other one I've begun to listen to, because I was in the car for 4 hours yesterday, I began to listen on Audible to Tracy Borman's Henry VIII and the Men Who Made Him. So I'd recommend that. I've only listened to the first 3 chapters or so, and it's already very good. Michael says, many things are stolen from museums by those who are supposed to look after them. I think as long as things are looked after, but we can't, if they're not ours, maybe we can't also dictate what happens to them after. But saying that, I'm feeling that way because I know we can now digitalize them. It maybe I'm being too simplistic, but if there's a record of it, most artifacts we will only have seen in a picture, or in a video. And if we're lucky, we get to see them in real life. I have to say, I am very, very happy that I saw the Rosetta Stone in real life, which is in the British Museum. So if that ever goes back, I will be very happy that I and my children have seen the Rosetta Stone in up close and personal. So anyways, so those 2 books, Houses of Power and Henry VIII, The Men Who Made Him, I would recommend. And I have a podcast to recommend to you as well this week. So like I mentioned, I was driving for a long time, and I started off, before I moved on to Tracy Borman's book, I was listening to Single Malt History, which is by Gareth Russell. It's his podcast. It's free on Spotify, Apple, and Google, and everywhere else you can get it. And I was listening particularly or specifically to the episode on the Lusitania, and shocking. After listening to that, I don't know how come the Lusitania isn't as big a story as Titanic, other than we've discussed Titanic before, and of course it being in films and storybooks, and it's depicted over and over again. That definitely obviously helps to keep a story alive. Michael says people learn more about objects. Studying. Yeah. So being able to study objects in real life, basically being able to handle them, does mean that they can learn more. Yeah. No, I agree that. I can see that. Oh, I think I've paused on Instagram. I think I'm back. The signal can start to go now because I'm going to wrap up. So let me just recommend that again: Single Malt History with Gareth Russell, and the episode about the Lusitania, because it will shock you if you don't know that story or you don't know much about it. It is. It was a bigger loss of life, I think, than on the Titanic, certainly in proportion of the number of people on it. The speed at which the ship went down. It was. I mean, this was a passenger liner that was torpedoed by a German submarine off the coast of Ireland in 1915. With a huge loss of life, and it went down really quickly. He was talking about the electricity. So just as an example, went out. So the electricity failed 4 minutes after the torpedo struck. There were people in elevators because that was the only way of getting out of the lower decks up onto deck. There were people in elevators trying to get out, and the elevators stopped, and that was it. Absolutely shocking, but important and fascinating as well. So well worth a listen. So I think that was all I have. Remember to sign up to Clubhouse. Remember to sign up to my newsletter if you don't mind while you're there. I don't bombard you. Like I say, I write to you once a week with the links to everything that's any videos that I've put out and any news as well that's coming up. I will start to have more news about my tours coming up soon, which I'll be able to share with you. Just talking interesting stuff again. And if you want to join me on tour, you want to join me on tour. And if you don't worry, it doesn't matter. I'll still be telling you all about where we're going and why and the stories behind it. So you'll get all that still. But for now, have a great rest of your day, and rolling into the weekend, have a great time. And I will see you next week for Thursday Tea Time Live. And no, Michael's apologising for putting his strong point of view. I am absolutely fine with strong points of view. I like strong points of view. It generally means that someone's thought about what they're thinking, what they're saying. Yeah. So it's fine by me. We don't all have to agree to get along, I think. Then the world will be a lot better place. Right. So everybody, take care. Have a fabulous day. I will see you all next week. And thank you for joining me today. All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.